The morning light from 3 different suns streamed through the tall windows of Lecture Hall 7 at the Galactic University of Centauri Prime. Students from across the known galaxy filled the seats, their various forms creating a colorful display of life. Some had 4 arms, others floated in special suits filled with gas, and a few communicated through flashing lights on their skin. In the back corner of the room sat Jake Morrison. He looked ordinary compared to his classmates. Brown hair, average height, wearing simple clothes that any human might wear. Most of the other students barely noticed him. He had been coming to these classes for 3 months now, always sitting in the same spot, always quiet, always taking notes. Jake was 22 years old and the only human in Professor Zethkari's xenobiology class. He had come to Centauri Prime through something called the Human Exchange Program. Only 50 humans in the entire galaxy were studying at alien universities. It was supposed to help different species understand each other better. Professor Zethkari entered the room with his usual confident stride. He was an Altarian, standing nearly 8 feet tall with crystal-like skin that caught the light from the 3 suns. His 4 arms moved independently as he prepared his teaching materials. His species was known throughout the galaxy for their intelligence and their detailed scientific research. The professor touched a control panel, and a large holographic display appeared in the center of the room. The image showed a small blue and green planet spinning slowly in space. Jake recognized it immediately, though he kept his face calm and continued writing in his notebook. "Students," Professor Zethkari began, his voice carrying easily through the room's translation system. "Today we will discuss something that most of you have only heard about in stories. We are going to study Class X Deathworlds." A murmur went through the classroom. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Vrek student named Clickstar, who looked like a giant praying mantis, clicked his mandibles nervously. The floating Netherians in their gas-filled suits seemed to dim their internal lights. "What exactly is a Class X Deathworld?" asked a student from the front row. She was a Scythe, tall and graceful, with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. "Professor." Zethkari smiled, showing teeth that sparkled like diamonds. "An excellent question, Student Nara. A Class 10 Deathworld is a planet where the conditions are so dangerous that life should not be able to survive. The gravity might be too strong, the weather too violent, or the other creatures too deadly." The holographic display zoomed in on the blue planet, showing its continents and oceans. "In our galaxy, we have found only 12 such worlds. Most of them are completely dead. Nothing lives there at all, but this one is different." Jake continued taking notes, his pen moving steadily across the paper. He had learned long ago to keep his reactions hidden. It was a useful skill for a human. "This planet is called Earth," the professor continued. "It is the 3rd planet from a yellow star that the inhabitants call Sol. Earth is the only Class 10 Deathworld that has produced intelligent life capable of space travel." The display changed to show various scenes from Earth. There were images of hurricanes swirling over oceans, volcanoes erupting with rivers of lava, and earthquakes splitting the ground. Several students made sounds of fear or disgust. "The conditions on this world are beyond what most of us can imagine," Professor Zethkari said, gesturing with 2 of his 4 arms. "The weather systems are incredibly violent. Storms with winds that can destroy buildings, floods that cover entire continents, droughts that last for years." A Vrek student raised a clawed arm. "Professor, how does anything survive in such conditions?" "That is the fascinating part," the professor replied. "Life on Earth does not just survive these conditions. It has learned to use them as weapons. The plants and animals have evolved in an environment where only the strongest, fastest, and smartest can live." The holographic display began showing different Earth creatures. A massive whale breached from the ocean, water cascading from its enormous body. A lion stalked across a grassland, its muscles rippling under its golden fur. A great white shark cut through the water with deadly grace. "Every creature on this planet is either a hunter or prey," Professor Zethkari explained. "Most are both. They spend their entire lives either trying to kill something or trying not to be killed. The Sci-Fi student, Nara, raised her hand. But surely some areas of the planet are safe? Professor Zethkari's crystalline features reflected the light as he shook his head. There are no safe areas on Earth. The deepest oceans contain creatures with teeth like daggers and bodies that glow in the darkness. The highest mountains are covered with ice that can kill in minutes. Even the most peaceful-looking meadows are filled with plants that produce deadly poisons. Jake looked up from his notes for a moment, observing his classmates' reactions. The fear in their eyes was real. These were beings from worlds where the most dangerous animal might be something equivalent to a rabbit. They could not understand what it meant to live on a planet where everything was trying to kill you. The truly remarkable thing, the professor continued, is that this planet has produced not just one intelligent species, but several. However, only one survived to develop technology. The display changed to show early human ancestors. Cave paintings, primitive tools, and scenes of early human life filled the holographic space. The humans eliminated all other intelligent species. On their planet, Professor Zethkari said matter-of-factly, Neanderthals, Denisovans, and others whose names we do not even know, they were not just successful survivors. They were successful killers. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the life support systems. Jake noticed that several students had moved slightly away from each other, as if the very discussion of such violence made them nervous. But Professor, said an Etherian student, their voice coming through their suit's translation device, surely this was millions of years ago? Primitive behavior? Professor Zethkari manipulated the holographic controls, and the display jumped forward in time. It showed human cities, human art, human music, but then it showed something else: weapons, wars, battles that covered entire continents. Humans have retained their predatory instincts even as they developed advanced technology, the professor explained. Their history is one long story of conflict. They fight over territory, resources, ideas, and sometimes just for the sake of fighting. Jake made a note in the margin of his paper. Around him, his classmates were becoming more agitated. The Vrex student, Clickstar, was clicking his mandibles rapidly. The Sci-Fi student, Nara, had wrapped her arms around herself as if cold. They have developed over 15,000 different ways to fight with their bare hands, Professor Zethkari continued. They call these martial arts. Each one is designed to disable or kill opponents in the most efficient way possible. The display showed humans practicing various fighting techniques. Kicks, punches, grappling moves, and weapons training filled the holographic space. Their military technology is equally advanced, the professor said. They have weapons that can destroy entire cities, vehicles that can move faster than sound, and communication systems that span their entire planet instantly. A student near the front of the room stood up suddenly. Professor, are you saying that these humans are still dangerous? That they pose a threat to other species? Professor Zethkari paused, his forearms freezing in their gestures. That is an excellent question, Student X. The truth is, we do not know. Humans have only recently made contact with the galactic community. Their intentions are unclear. Jake continued writing, but his attention was now completely focused on the conversation. This was why he was here, though his classmates did not know it yet. What we do know, the professor continued, is that humans are the most successful predator species their planet has ever produced. They are intelligent, adaptable, and capable of working together in large groups. They are also patient, very patient. The professor looked around the room at his students. Humans can track prey for days without rest. They can wait in hiding for hours without moving. They can plan attacks that take months or even years to complete. Jake felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes as his classmates began to look around the room nervously. But none of them looked at him. To them, he was just another student taking notes and learning about the galaxy. Tomorrow, Professor Zethkari announced, we will discuss the specific biological adaptations that make humans such effective predators. For now, I suggest you all read Chapter 15 in your textbooks. It covers the hunting techniques of Earth's apex predators. As the class ended and students began filing out of the room, Jake remained in his seat. He continued writing in his notebook, documenting not just what the professor had said, but how his classmates had reacted. Fear, disgust, fascination, and worry. All useful information. He was the only human in the room. But he was not the only human on Centauri Prime, and he was certainly not the only human gathering information about the galaxy's various species. The Human Exchange Program was more than just an educational opportunity. It was reconnaissance. The next morning, Jake Morrison arrived at Lecture Hall 7:15 minutes early, just as he had every day for the past 3 months. He chose the same seat in the back corner and opened his notebook to a fresh page. The morning light from the 3 suns created long shadows across the empty classroom. Other students began filtering in slowly. Jake watched them carefully, noting how they moved, where they sat, and how they interacted with each other. The Vrex student Clickstar entered with quick, nervous movements, his insect-like head turning constantly to scan the room. The Silithy student Nara floated in gracefully, her pale blue skin seeming to glow in the morning light. The Nefarians arrived in a group, their gas-filled suits making soft whooshing sounds as they moved. Jake had learned that they communicated through chemical signals, which their suits translated into audible speech for other species. Today, their internal lights seemed dimmer than usual. Professor Zethkari entered exactly on time, his 4 arms carrying various teaching materials. His crystalline skin reflected the light from the holographic projectors as he set up his equipment. The professor seemed excited about today's lesson, his movements quick and purposeful. "Students," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation system. "Yesterday we discussed the general conditions of the Deathworld called Earth. Today, we will examine the specific creatures that inhabit this dangerous planet." The holographic display activated, showing a rotating image of a massive predator. Jake recognized it as a Tyrannosaurus Rex, though he knew it had been extinct for millions of years. Several students gasped at the sight of the enormous creature with its huge teeth and powerful jaws. "This creature lived on Earth millions of years ago," Professor Zethkari explained. "It was called a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it was one of the largest land predators in the planet's history. Notice the size of its teeth and the strength of its jaw muscles." The display zoomed in on the creature's massive head. Its bite force was estimated at over 50,000 newtons. For comparison, the strongest bite force recorded among current galactic species is barely 8,000 newtons. Clickstar clicked, his mandibles rapidly. "Professor, surely such creatures no longer exist on Earth?" "You are correct, student Clickstar. The Tyrannosaurus Rex is extinct. However, Earth's current predators are in many ways more dangerous because they are faster, smarter, and better adapted to their environment." The display changed to show a pack of wolves running through snow. Their coordination was perfect, each animal knowing exactly where to be and when to move. Jake made a note about his classmates' reactions as several of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "These are called wolves," the professor continued. "They are pack hunters working together to bring down prey much larger than themselves. Notice how they communicate with each other through body language and vocalizations." The hologram showed the wolves surrounding a large deer. They moved with deadly precision, cutting off escape routes and wearing down their prey through exhaustion. Several students made sounds of distress. "The wolves' hunting strategy is based on endurance and teamwork," Professor Zethkari explained. "They can run for hours without stopping, and they coordinate their attacks with remarkable intelligence." Nera raised her hand, her voice trembling slightly. "Professor, these pack hunting techniques seem very advanced. Are there other creatures on Earth that hunt in groups?" "An excellent question," the professor replied. "Yes, pack hunting is common among Earth's predators. Humans actually learn many of their hunting techniques by observing other pack hunters on their planet." The display changed to show a group of lions hunting on an African savanna. The female lions moved with fluid grace, their golden fur blending with the tall grass. They surrounded a herd of zebras, working together to isolate and attack the weakest member. Lions are another example of coordinated predators, the professor said. The females do most of the hunting while the males defend the territory. They have developed specific roles within their pack structure. Jake continued taking notes, but he was also watching the professor carefully. The alien's excitement about the subject was obvious, but Jake wondered if the professor truly understood what he was teaching. These were not just interesting facts about dangerous animals. They were lessons in how predators think and operate. The holographic display shifted to show creatures from Earth's oceans. A great white shark cut through the water with terrifying speed, its black eyes fixed on its prey. Several students moved back in their seats as if the hologram might somehow reach them. Earth's oceans contain some of the most efficient predators in the galaxy, Professor Zefkari continued. This great white shark can detect electrical impulses from other living creatures. It can smell blood in the water from kilometers away. The display showed the shark attacking a seal, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of razor-sharp teeth. The attack was over in seconds, brutal and efficient. The shark's hunting strategy is based on surprise and overwhelming force, the professor explained. It attacks from below, using its speed and power to disable its prey before it can escape. Netherian student's voice crackled through their translator. Professor, these creatures seem designed only for killing. Do any of Earth's animals live peacefully? Professor Zefkari's crystalline features seemed to brighten with amusement. That is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Earth's ecosystem. Even the creatures that appear peaceful are often deadly. The display changed to show what looked like a small, harmless monkey. It had large eyes and soft fur, and several students relaxed at the sight of something that finally seemed non-threatening. This creature is called a slow loris, the professor said. It appears harmless, but it produces a toxin that can cause severe injury or death to other animals. It is one of the only venomous mammals on Earth. The students who had relaxed now looked shocked. Even the cute animals on Earth were dangerous. The plant life is equally deceptive, the professor continued. The display showed a beautiful flower with bright red petals. This is called a castor bean plant. It produces a toxin called ricin that is deadly in extremely small amounts. Jake made another note as he watched his classmates' growing fear. The professor was doing an excellent job of explaining just how dangerous Earth could be, but he was also teaching them to be afraid of anything that came from Earth, including humans. The holographic display shifted to show a large spider sitting in its web. The creature was covered in black hair and had 8 legs that seemed to move independently. Several students made sounds of disgust and fear. This is a black widow spider, Professor Zefkari explained. It is smaller than most of your hands, but its venom is powerful enough to kill creatures hundreds of times its size. The female often kills and eats the male after mating. Clickstar's mandibles clicked rapidly. Professor, how do any creatures survive on such a planet? It seems impossible. Survival on Earth requires constant adaptation, the professor replied. Every creature must be faster, stronger, smarter, or more toxic than its enemies. Those that cannot adapt quickly enough become extinct. The display showed a time-lapse sequence of various Earth creatures evolving over millions of years. Predators became more efficient, prey became more elusive, and the endless arms race continued. 96% of all species that have ever lived on Earth are now extinct, Professor Zefkari said. The creatures that exist today are the survivors of countless extinction events. Climate changes and evolutionary pressures, the hologram, showed the aftermath of asteroid impacts, ice ages, and volcanic eruptions. Each catastrophe eliminated thousands of species, but new ones always evolved to fill the empty spaces. This constant pressure has created an ecosystem where every creature is optimized for survival, the professor continued. They are faster, stronger, and more adaptable than creatures from more peaceful worlds. Jake looked around the classroom, at his fellow students. The fear in their eyes was obvious now. They were beginning to understand that Earth was not just a dangerous planet, but a world that had created perfect killing machines through millions of years of evolution. Tomorrow, Professor Zethkari announced, we will discuss the most successful predator that Earth has ever produced. The creature that eliminated all other intelligent species and now dominates the entire planet. As the class ended, Jake remained in his seat while the other students filed out. He could hear them talking in hushed voices about the terrifying world they had just learned about. None of them seemed to realize that they were sharing their classroom with a product of that world. Jake closed his notebook and prepared to leave. He had learned something important today, but it was not about Earth's dangerous creatures. He had learned how other species reacted when they discovered just how deadly his homeworld could be. The fear in their eyes told him everything he needed to know about how the galaxy might respond to human expansion. And that information would be very useful for the people who had sent him here. The third day of lectures began with an unusual tension in the air. Jake Morrison noticed it as soon as he entered Lecture Hall 7. Several students were whispering to each other in small groups, their voices low and urgent. The Vreck student. Clickstar was standing near the window, his insect-like head turning constantly as if watching for danger. The Silithy student Nara sat with her arms wrapped around herself, her pale blue skin even paler than usual. Jake took his usual seat in the back corner and opened his notebook. He had spent the previous evening reviewing his notes from the first 2 lectures, but more importantly, he had been analyzing the behavioral patterns of his classmates. Fear was a powerful motivator, and it was clear that Professor Zethkari lessons were having exactly the effect Jake had expected. The Netherians floated into the room in their gas-filled suits, but their usual group formation was different today. Instead of clustering together as they normally did, they had spread out across the room. Their internal lights were dim, and their chemical communication seemed more rapid than usual. Professor Zethkari entered the classroom with his typical confident stride, but Jake noticed something different about the professor's demeanor. His forearms moved with more purpose, and his crystalline features seemed to reflect the light more intensely. He was excited about today's lesson, perhaps. More excited than he had been about any previous topic. Students, the professor began, his voice carrying clearly through the translation system. Today we reach the culmination of our study of Earth's Deathworld ecosystem. We will examine the apex predator, the ultimate survivor, the creature that conquered an entire planet. The holographic display activated, showing a simple outline of a human figure. It was just a basic anatomical diagram, but Jake could feel the tension in the room increase immediately. Several students shifted in their seats, and Clickstar made a soft clicking sound with his mandibles. "Behold the human," Professor Zethkari announced. "The most successful predator species in Earth's history." The display began adding details to the human figure. Muscle structure, skeletal system, and organ placement became visible as the professor manipulated the controls. At first glance, the professor continued, humans appear to be relatively weak creatures. They have no natural armor, no claws, no fangs, and no venom. Compared to other Earth predators, they seem almost defenseless. Jake made a note in his margin while watching his classmates' reactions. Several of them looked confused, as if wondering how such a seemingly harmless creature could be dangerous. However, Professor Zethkari said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, this apparent weakness is actually their greatest strength. Humans are persistence predators evolved for endurance hunting over vast distances. The holographic display changed to show the human circulatory and respiratory systems. The professor highlighted the large heart, efficient lungs, and extensive blood vessel network. A human can run continuously for hours without stopping, the professor explained. Their bodies are designed to maintain steady movement over enormous distances. They can track wounded prey for days, never allowing it to rest or recover. The display showed ancient humans pursuing large animals across open grasslands. The humans moved at a steady pace while their prey ran in desperate bursts, becoming exhausted and eventually collapsing. This hunting method is called persistence hunting, Professor Zethkari continued. The human wounds its prey with primitive weapons, then follows the blood trail. The prey cannot rest because the human never stops following. Eventually, the prey dies from exhaustion and blood loss. Nara raised her hand, her voice trembling slightly. Professor, that sounds incredibly cruel. Surely no intelligent species would hunt in such a way. Professor Zethkari's crystalline features seemed to glow brighter. But that is exactly what makes humans so terrifying. They combine this relentless hunting ability with advanced intelligence. The holographic display shifted to show the human brain, highlighting different regions in various colors. The human brain is optimized for pattern recognition, strategic planning, and social coordination. They can predict the behavior of their prey, plan complex hunting strategies, and work together in large groups. Jake continued writing, but he was now paying close attention to every word the professor spoke. This was not just academic information anymore. This was intelligence gathering, and he was the subject being studied. Humans develop something called pack intelligence, the professor continued. Individual humans share information with each other, creating a collective knowledge base that spans their entire species. Every human child learns the accumulated hunting experience of thousands of previous generations. The display showed human children learning various skills, making tools, tracking animals, reading weather patterns, and understanding the behavior of other creatures. But their most dangerous adaptation is their ability to use tools, Professor Zethkari said. Humans can turn almost anything into a weapon. Rocks become hammers, sticks become spears, and metal becomes blades. The holographic display showed the evolution of human weapons over thousands of years. Simple stone tools gave way to bronze spears, then iron swords, and eventually to more advanced weapons that Jake recognized from human military history. Humans are also ambush predators, the professor continued. They can remain motionless for hours, waiting for the perfect moment to attack. They can camouflage themselves to blend into their environment, becoming invisible to their prey. Several students looked around the room nervously, as if suddenly realizing that a predator might be hiding anywhere. Jake kept his expression neutral and continued taking notes. Their sensory systems are equally impressive, Professor Zethkari explained. Binocular vision provides precise depth perception for targeting prey. Their hearing can detect subtle changes in breathing and heartbeat that indicate fear or weakness in other creatures. The display showed detailed images of human eyes and ears, highlighting the structures that made them effective hunting tools. Humans also possess something called intuition, the professor said. This is a subconscious processing system that allows them to predict the behavior of other species. They can sense when another creature is afraid, angry, or preparing to attack. Jake looked up from his notes for a moment and made brief eye contact with Nara. She immediately looked away, a visible shudder running through her delicate frame. He had not done anything threatening, but her instincts were telling her that something was wrong. Perhaps most disturbing of all, Professor Zethkari continued, humans retained all of these predatory instincts even as they developed advanced technology. They did not evolve beyond their violent nature. They simply found better ways to express it. The holographic display showed human warfare throughout history. Ancient battles with spears and swords gave way to conflicts involving gunpowder, then mechanized warfare, and finally the devastating weapons of modern human civilization. Humans have been in a constant state of warfare for their entire recorded history, the professor explained. They fight over territory, resources, beliefs, and sometimes simply for the sake of fighting. They have developed over 15,000 distinct martial arts disciplines, each one designed to disable or kill opponents efficiently. The display showed humans practicing various fighting techniques: empty-hand combat, weapons training, and coordinated military tactics filled the holographic space. Clickstar's mandibles clicked rapidly. Professor, surely these are ancient behaviors? Modern humans must have evolved beyond such primitive instincts? Professor Zethkari manipulated the controls, and the display showed more recent human activities: space exploration, scientific Research and cultural achievements appeared alongside continued evidence of military development and conflict. "This is what makes humans truly dangerous," the professor said. "They have retained every predatory adaptation while developing the technology to use those adaptations on a galactic scale." The display showed human spacecraft, communication systems, and advanced weapons. A modern human with access to their species' technology represents a threat level that exceeds our current classification systems. Jake made another note while observing the growing panic in his classmates' body language. The Netherians had dimmed their internal lights to almost nothing. Clickstar was backing toward the exit. Mara was gripping the edges of her seat with white knuckles. "But Professor," a student near the front asked, "surely humans cannot be that dangerous?" "They are just one species on one planet," Professor Zethkari's crystalline features reflected the holographic light as he smiled. "That is perhaps the most frightening aspect of all. Humans are not content to remain on their own planet. They are explorers, colonizers, and conquerors by nature." The display showed human expansion into space, colony ships, space stations, and the gradual spread of human civilization across multiple star systems. "They are currently expanding into our galaxy," the professor continued. "Their population grows rapidly, their technology advances constantly, and their hunger for new territories appears to be unlimited." Jake closed his notebook and leaned back in his chair. The professor had just spent an hour explaining to a room full of galactic citizens exactly why they should fear humanity. More importantly, the fourth day of lectures brought an atmosphere of barely controlled fear to Lecture Hall 7. Jake Morrison arrived early as usual, but this time he was not alone in the classroom. Several students had arrived even earlier, clustering together in small groups and speaking in urgent whispers. Their body language spoke of creatures preparing for danger. Clickstar stood near the back wall, his insect-like head constantly moving as he watched every entrance to the room. His mandibles clicked in a rapid, nervous pattern that Jake had learned meant extreme anxiety among the Vrex species. The Sci-Fi student Nara sat in the front row today, as far from the back corner where Jake usually sat as possible. Her pale blue skin had taken on an almost gray tint. The Netherians had arranged themselves in a defensive formation, their gas-filled suits positioned so they could communicate rapidly with each other through their chemical signals. Their internal lights pulsed in coordinated patterns that Jake recognized as a warning system. Jake took his usual seat and opened his notebook, but he could feel the weight of alien eyes watching him more carefully than before. For 3 months, he had been invisible to them, just another student taking notes. Now, after 3 days of learning about the horrors of Earth and its apex predator, they were beginning to notice the only human in their classroom, Professor Zethkari entered with his typical confident stride, but Jake noticed something different about the professor today. His forearms carried additional security devices, and his crystalline features seemed more alert than usual. The professor had clearly taken his own lessons to heart and was now treating his classroom as potentially dangerous territory. "Students," the professor began, his voice carrying through the translation system with unusual gravity, "today we will discuss the most concerning aspect of our study. We will examine human expansion into galactic space and what this means for established civilizations." The holographic display activated, showing a map of the local galactic sector. Dozens of star systems appeared as glowing points of light, connected by trade routes and communication networks. Jake recognized several of the systems as locations where humans had established colonies or research stations. Human expansion began approximately 50 years ago when they achieved faster-than-light travel, Professor Zethkari explained. Since that time, they have established settlements in over 200 star systems. Red dots began appearing on the galactic map, marking human colonies and outposts. Jake watched his classmates' reactions as the red dots multiplied across the display. The expansion pattern was more extensive than most of them had realized. "The rate of human expansion is unprecedented in galactic history," the professor continued. "Most species take centuries to establish even a few dozen colonies. Humans have achieved this level of expansion in just 5 decades. Nara raised her hand, her voice barely above a whisper. Professor, how is such rapid expansion possible? Humans employ several strategies that other species find difficult to understand, Professor Zethkari replied. First, they are willing to settle on worlds that other species consider uninhabitable. Remember, they evolved on a Deathworld. Planets that would kill most of us are comfortable homes for humans. The display showed several human colonies on worlds with extreme conditions. Planets with high gravity, toxic atmospheres, and dangerous weather patterns all hosted thriving human settlements. Second, humans reproduce at a rate that most civilized species find shocking, the professor continued. A human colony can double its population every 20 to 30 years. They send large families to new worlds and establish permanent settlements very quickly. Jake made notes while observing the growing alarm in his classmates' body language. They were beginning to understand that human expansion was not just rapid, but potentially unstoppable. Third, and perhaps most importantly, humans are willing to fight for territory, Professor Zethkari said. Most galactic species prefer negotiation and peaceful coexistence. Humans view territory as something to be claimed and defended. The holographic display showed several border disputes where human colonies had expanded into areas claimed by other species. In every case, the humans had either negotiated from a position of strength or simply taken what they wanted. But Professor, Clickstar said, his mandibles clicking rapidly, surely the galactic community can establish boundaries? Can we not simply tell humans where they may and may not settle? Professor Zethkari's crystalline features seemed to dim. That brings us to the most disturbing aspect of human expansion. They do not respect boundaries that they did not help establish. The display showed the current political map of the galaxy, with various species' territories marked in different colors. Then it showed projected human expansion over the next century. Red areas began spreading across the map like a slow infection. Human diplomatic strategy is based on their predatory nature, the professor explained. They negotiate only when they cannot simply take what they want. They make agreements only when those agreements benefit them, and they break agreements when it serves their purposes. Jake looked around the room and saw pure terror in his classmates' eyes. They were realizing that their peaceful, civilized approach to galactic politics was useless against a species that thought like predators. Furthermore, Professor Zethkari continued, humans have begun infiltrating other species' societies. They send students, researchers, and diplomats to learn about our cultures, our technologies, and our weaknesses. Jake's pen paused for just a moment before continuing to move across the page. Several students turned to look at each other with growing realization. The Human Exchange Program, for example, the professor said, places human students in universities across the galaxy. Officially, this is for educational and cultural exchange. However, many experts believe it is actually an intelligence-gathering operation. The silence in the room was complete except for the quiet hum of life support systems. Jake could feel the attention of every student beginning to focus on him, though none of them had yet made the full connection. These human students observe our societies, learn our languages, study our technologies, and report back to their governments, Professor Zethkari explained. They are gathering information that could be used for military, economic, or political advantage. Nara's voice was barely audible. Professor, are you saying there might be human spies among us right now? Professor Zethkari looked around the classroom, his crystalline eyes reflecting the holographic light. It is certainly possible. Humans are expert at camouflage and deception. They could be anywhere, watching and learning, and we might never know. Jake closed his notebook and leaned back in his chair. The professor had just explained to a room full of galactic citizens that humans were not just dangerous predators, but active threats to their civilizations. More importantly, he had told them that humans were already among them, gathering intelligence. But surely, said an Etherian student, their voice crackling through their translator, we would know if there were humans in our institutions? They would be obvious, would they not? Professor Zethkari manipulated the holographic controls, showing images of humans interacting with various alien species. Humans are remarkably adaptable. They can learn to mimic the behavior patterns of other species. They are patient observers who can blend into almost any environment. The display showed humans working alongside aliens in research facilities, diplomatic missions, and educational institutions. In every image, the humans appeared friendly and harmless. Remember, the professor continued, humans are ambush predators. They excel at remaining unnoticed until the moment they choose to strike. A human infiltrator could spend months or even years in one location, gathering information while appearing to be nothing more than a curious student or researcher. Jake stood up slowly from his seat. The movement was fluid and controlled, but it immediately drew the attention of everyone in the room. For the first time in 3 months, every eye in the classroom was focused on him. "Professor," Jake said, his voice calm and steady, "you have provided an excellent education about human capabilities and intentions. I've learned a great deal about how other species view my kind." The silence that followed was absolute. Professor Zethkari S4. Arms froze in their gestures. Clickstar's mandibles stopped clicking. Nara's pale blue skin went completely white. "My kind?" Professor Zethkari whispered. Jake smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the university, he did not try to make it appear friendly or harmless. It was the smile of a predator who had been patiently waiting for the right moment. "I am Jake Morrison," he said, walking slowly down the steps toward the front of the classroom. "Human, student in the Human Exchange Program, and for the past 3 months I have been sitting in this classroom, taking notes not about Earth's dangerous creatures but about all of you." Several students backed away from their seats. Clickstar moved toward the exit, but Jake's head turned to track the movement with perfect precision. "You see, Professor," Jake continued, "everything you have taught about humans is correct. We are patient, we are observant, we are very good at blending into environments where we do not belong, and we are excellent at gathering information about potential threats." Jake Morrison stood at the front of Lecture Hall 7, his communication device crackling with responses from across the galaxy. The voices coming through the small speaker were calm and professional, reporting the completion of various missions, with the efficiency that only humans seem to possess. Echo 2 reporting, intelligence gathering at Rex Prime complete. Departing research facility now. Echo 7 here. Silithy defensive protocols have been fully documented. Moving to extraction point, Echo 12. Netherian communication networks mapped. All data transmitted to command. Professor Zethkari listened to the reports with growing horror, his crystalline features reflecting the light from the holographic display that still showed human expansion across the galaxy. His forearms trembled as he realized the scope of what he was hearing. "How many?" the professor whispered. "How many of you are there?" Jake looked around the classroom at his terrified former classmates. Clickstar had backed against the wall, his insect-like form frozen in panic. Nara sat in her chair as if unable to move, her pale blue skin now completely white. The Netherians floated in their gas-filled suits, their internal lights pulsing rapidly in what Jake had learned was their equivalent of hyperventilation. 50 humans in this sector alone," Jake replied calmly. "But that is just the beginning. Every month, more human students, researchers, and diplomats arrive at institutions across the galaxy, all of them learning, observing, and reporting back to Human Command. More voices crackled through the communication device as humans across dozens of worlds checked in with their status reports. The pattern was always the same. Mission complete, intelligence gathered, extraction in progress. Echo 23. Medical research data from Altarian hospitals has been copied. Their biological weaknesses are now fully cataloged. Echo 31 reporting. Quantum communication technology specifications acquired from the Galactic Communications Center. Echo 45. Political alliance structures between the Outer Rim species have been mapped. Recommend immediate strategic planning. Professor Zethkari activated his own communication device with shaking hands. Security to Lecture Hall 7. Emergency situation. Possible hostile infiltration. Jake shook his head slowly. I would not recommend that, Professor. You see, humans are not just good at gathering intelligence. We are also very good at making friends. The classroom door opened and Chief Security Officer Dren entered. He was a large, heavily armored Corvan with thick, gray skin and multiple eyes. Behind him came two security guards carrying energy weapons. They moved with the confidence of beings who had never encountered a threat they could not handle. Professor Zethkari, Chief Dren said in his deep, rumbling voice, what is the nature of the emergency? This human student, the professor said, pointing at Jake with one of his forearms. He is a spy. He has been gathering intelligence on our species and communicating with other human agents. Chief Dren looked at Jake, taking in his ordinary appearance and calm demeanor. This small human? Professor, are you certain you are not overreacting? Jake smiled at the security chief. Hello, Dren. How is your daughter doing at the academy? Little Kessa, right? She is in her 3rd year of engineering studies? Chief Dren's multiple eyes widened in shock. How do you know about my daughter? Humans make friends easily, Jake replied. We are social creatures. Over the past 3 months, I have had conversations with dozens of staff members here at the university. Security guards, maintenance workers, cafeteria staff, even some administrators. People like to talk, especially to someone who seems harmless and genuinely interested in their lives. Jake pulled out his notebook and flipped through several pages. Dren has a daughter named Kessa at the Engineering Academy on Corvan Prime. His wife Mayra works as a medical technician at the Central Hospital. They live in apartment complex 7, Unit 42. Dren's greatest fear is that his daughter will not be able to find good work after graduation because of the economic problems in the outer systems. Chief Dren's hand moved toward his weapon, but Jake continued speaking in the same calm tone. Officer Rock here, Jake said, nodding toward one of the security guards, is saving money to propose to his girlfriend Tina, who works in the communications department. He has been looking at engagement rings for 6 months, but cannot decide which one she would like best. The security guard named Rock looked shocked. I never told you about Tina. You did not have to, Jake replied. Humans are very good at reading body language, facial expressions, and vocal patterns. We can learn a great deal about someone just by watching how they behave. You check your communication device every 23 minutes on average. You smile slightly whenever you receive a message. You have been asking other guards about jewelry. Stores in the area. It was not difficult to determine that you are in a serious relationship. Jake looked at the other security guard. And Officer Nex has been working double shifts to pay for his brother's medical treatments. His brother was injured in a mining accident 8 months ago and needs expensive surgery that the family insurance does not cover. Officer Nex stepped backward, his weapon wavering in his hands. How could you possibly know that? Because I pay attention, Jake said simply. Every human does. We observe, we remember, and we learn. It is what makes us effective predators, but it also makes us effective at understanding other people. Chief Dren's voice was barely a whisper. What do you want from us? Jake activated his communication device again. Command, this is Echo 1. Local security has been neutralized through social intelligence rather than force. Recommend psychological approach for all extraction operations. A new voice came through the device, speaking with the authority of someone in command. Understood, Echo 1. All units are reporting successful mission completion. Phase 1 of Operation Deep Learning is now complete. Professor Zethkari's crystalline features seemed to crack. Phase 1? There are more phases? Phase 1 was intelligence gathering, Jake explained. 50 humans spending months or years in your institutions, learning everything about your technologies, your cultures, your military capabilities, and your weaknesses. We now know more about galactic civilization than most galactic citizens do. Jake walked slowly toward the holographic display, which still showed the map of human expansion across the galaxy. Phase 2 will be strategic positioning. Humans will request permission to establish research stations, trading posts, and diplomatic missions in key star systems. You will grant these requests because we have proven to be friendly and helpful. He manipulated the holographic controls, adding new red dots to the map showing proposed human facilities. The pattern created a network that would give humans influence over most major trade routes and communication networks. Phase 3 will be economic integration, Jake continued. Human businesses will establish partnerships with local companies. Human technology will become essential to your infrastructure. Human advisors will help solve your political and economic problems. More red dots appeared on the map, showing the spread of human economic influence. Within a few decades, human interests would be deeply embedded in every major galactic civilization. And Phase 4? Professor Zethkari asked, though he seemed to already know the answer. Jake's smile returned, but this time it was not predatory. It was almost gentle. Phase 4 is integration. By then, human and galactic interests will be so closely connected that separation will be impossible. We will not conquer your civilizations, Professor. We will become part of them. He looked around the classroom at the alien students and security officers. You spent 4 days learning about Earth's predators and how dangerous humans can be. But you missed the most important lesson. Which is? Nara whispered. Humans are not just predators, Jake said. We are also pack animals. We take care of our pack, and over the next century, the galaxy is going to become our pack. Jake picked up his notebook and headed toward the exit. Your education about Deathworld species is now complete. But do not worry. You will have plenty of opportunities to continue learning about humans. We are going to be neighbors for a very long time. As Jake Morrison walked out of Lecture Hall 7 for the last time, he could hear Chief Dren trying to call for backup, Professor Zethkari attempting to contact university administration, and his former classmates discussing what they should do next. None of it mattered. The intelligence had been gathered, the assessments had been completed, and the real human expansion into the galaxy was about to begin. But it would not be the violent conquest that the aliens feared. It would be something much more sophisticated, much more human. It would be friendship, partnership, and gradual integration until the line between human and galactic civilization disappeared completely. And by the time anyone realized what had happened, it would be far too late to change course. After all, humans were very good at making friends. They were also very good at keeping them.